All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of A Sip of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Lou Bryson, and Liz Rhoades, plus a special guest who will be along shortly, Matt Healy from Potstilledcom.
Very special.
I'll let your host introduce Matt when he arrives in a few minutes. But in the meantime, as always, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. Just want to point out ways that you can interact with each other and your hosts and their eventual guests throughout the show today. On your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world right now. It's always great to see that. If you have a question at any point for Matt or for your three hosts during the show, there's a little button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. So just press that button, enter your question in there, and hit send. I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show. And last but not least, feel free to invite anyone you know to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But with that said, Marty, Liz, I'll let you guys take it from here.
Thanks there, Will. I was going to tell you, Will, I saw the doctor the other day, and he said he had good news, he had bad news, and he had worse news. He said the bad news is that I only have 6 days to live. He said the worst news was that he tried to reach me 5 days ago. So, and then I asked for a second opinion, and he said, "You're ugly too."
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I combined two Henny Youngman jokes together, as far as close together. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Duffy, former senior master of whiskey in my youth. For 14 glorious years, 18 less than glorious months as the as the North American brand representative for Glencairn. Not for Glencairn, I'm still that. Now, these guys, for Benedictine.
Back it up, buddy. Back it up.
Uncle Marty is a little tipsy whipsy hungover from last night. For Benedictine. Then for 8 years, I was the co-producer of the Chicago Independent Spirit Expo, which I was at again last night.
Last night,
nice.
yeah.
It was a good time. Too good. And then for the last 7 years, I've been the sole brand representative of Glencairn Crystal, the only whiskey glaze out there. The others, they all melt. As soon as you they're made of rice paper, so don't buy them. So you put whiskey in, they melt. Lizard, you're so big.
I know. Adjustments, like.
I was not ready for my close-up.
Thank you, Marty. Was there a highlight? I'm putting you on the spot. Highlight of last night. Any Spirits Expo last night?
Not falling over. You mean as
I'm
far
not
as
sure, but it was
spirit I
something from
tasted?
MGP.
Yeah, I think it was that one whiskey. Although no, I'm sorry, the 40 whiskeys I had from MGP. At 40 different tables. No, I mean, there was a lot of great stuff. I think the biggest highlight for me was just seeing everybody. It was great.
Yeah.
It was so cool to see everyone. And it was so weird. You'd see, I hadn't seen folks for 2 years.
Yeah.
Especially the older guys. I don't know what this trend is with all these old dudes growing their hair out long. Everybody looked like a freaking hippie. I had to hit some people. So it's different. I love your long hair, but you see some old dude with old gray hair, and it's
not an old dude, Liz.
They look like Howard Hughes.
Thank you.
You expect them to be carrying around jars of urine and wearing
enough
tissue boxes on their feet. It's just,
you know what? Let them do them.
See, you're a bit of a hippie too. Let them do that. No, I'll go around smacking with it. Look, cut hair. That's good.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
It's easy.
Let's get back to the introductions.
Yeah, we're going a bit out of order, as you can see. We're kind of milking the camera a little bit, waiting for guests to arrive, which will be,
guest.
late.
Oh yeah, we've got a guest. And
it takes a long time for those airwaves to travel across the Atlantic.
Hey everyone, Thank you for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across several different substrates and product types, including beer, rum, vodka. But my particular favorite and expertise happens to be whiskey, which is what the show's about, so that works out well. Spent most of my career at a tiny mom and pop company known as DIAGEO. I'm now currently founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And if you want to maybe learn a little bit more about what I have going on at Spirit Safe, you can actually scroll down to About the Host section. There's a link to my website, so check it out. Lou?
Thanks, Liz. I'm Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. I was the managing editor at Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years, and hung my shingle on my own again and produced these two little babies, Whiskey Masterclass and Tasting a Whiskey. Great tomes of whiskey knowledge and a tool for your greater enjoyment of it. The whiskey I am drinking today is the brand spanking new Johnny Walker High Rye Blended Scotch Whiskey, which, as we were discussing earlier in the show, I think sets like a completely new bar for transparency in Johnny Walker. We've got a mash bill. We've got they talk about what casks. They talk about the signature distilleries in the blend, and they actually named them. Cardew, Cameron Bridge. When was the last time you actually heard a blended whiskey naming their grain source? Tasting notes, and the whiskey makers are name checked. George Harper and the outgoing Jim Beveridge. Yeah.
Lou, do they mention on there, are those the only whiskeys? Do they kind of make you think it's...
They say signature distilleries.
Okay. So like Johnny Walker Green always lists Talisker, Sagamore, Linkwood. Talisker, Linkwood.
It's good too.
There's 4, but those are the 4. I know there's 15 different malts that go into Green Label.
Those are the major ones.
Those 4, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the 4th one? Talisker, Cragganmore, Linkwood. I think Kalila.
It's got to be Kalila.
Yeah, that baby is the workhorse of the
Diageo's table. Yeah, it's like ketchup.
It is, or like
a kind of smoky ketchup.
Yeah,
is that our free marketing bit?
There's our advice, Johnny Walker. Add a little ketchup.
Yeah, on a bun.
We'll dabble, do ya?
Spirit drink.
Yeah.
I also have a hat. That is a barbecue hat. That's a Q with a pig nose. I don't know if you. Yeah. So that's the little thing. I don't know that it's a particular brand. I think it's just yay barbecue.
I kind of like it. At the same time, a pig nose. The nose of a pig is the second least appetizing area. Oh my God! There he is. Oh my God! He's here.
Howdy, folks.
Hey.
Amazing.
Thanks for overcoming our attempt to kick you in the shins. That's
Where you been there, Matthew?
Oh, well, I'm oddly confused by why we're live right now, considering I was told that it's 5:30 going live time, and it's currently 5:10.
We just figured this out. So typically it's 6 hours ahead of me. So if it's noon here, we go on. So
time zone
you
math.
should have joined us at 5:30 Greenwich Means Time, but I don't know if has there been a, do you guys do time changes over there?
We do, and that's why I thought you were being very specific when you told me the time earlier was 5:30 GMT, because until yesterday it was 5:30 GMT plus 1.
Yeah.
Today it became GMT.
See, there you go. You guys don't notify us of those things.
This weekend?
That's the problem. Yeah, so it's your fault. So,
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, I'm not taking blame.
Should we get on with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a thought.
So everyone,
Time's a wasted.
welcome into 11 minutes into the show. Welcome.
Cash.
This is a sip of knowledge, and our special guest. He's a man who's probably has his finger on the pulse of everything that's going on over in Ireland as far as the distilling world goes. He is the main creator and I think sole reporter for Potstilledcom. If you haven't seen that and you're really into Irish whiskey, I highly recommend sign up for his newsletters. There's his posts, and then he's also global sales director at now. Correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, because the freaking Irish love to play with pronunciations. Bowen Distillery.
Yeah, Bowen Distillery. Yeah, Bowen. It's all good.
Bowen.
Yeah.
Bowen. You gotta say it like that. Bowen. Go on, Bowen. See?
Exactly.
Right.
You've got it.
All right, Matthew. Well, welcome. And I've been looking forward to this because I love your Potstilledcom and all the information you send out. It's amazing. I don't know how you do that and hold down a regular job. Is that?
I mean, it's fun. It's challenging. It's people think it is my regular job, and if only I could be paid for it, it'd be great.
Well, I was actually surprised when I found you worked for the distillery. I thought, thought this was your main gig. I thought you were the Lou Bryson of Ireland.
Oh, you should talk, mister. I have a job opening for you in Chicago. Geez, Marty, you're doing public service stuff all the time.
A lot of PSAs, you mean?
You're like the booze Craigslist of Chicago.
That's because, well, yeah, I know, but I work from home and I'm old. And
get bored.
Yeah, I'm on the internet all the time. So Matthew, tell us, how'd you get into this? And I'm really interested because I was over in Ireland. I worked at Guinness for 2 years, starting 2008 to 2010, and the Irish whiskey industry, was really just a couple of the big guys. You had Bushmills in the north, Middleton in the south. You had John Teeling still owned Cooley, and that was really it. And you've heard rumbles that maybe some folks were making whiskey, but nothing was. In fact, and of
course, Tullamore running around stealing barrels from everybody.
Yeah. Kind of thing. And Oliver Hughes, I remember running into Oliver Hughes when he was looking for additional financing to start the Dingle distillery. So that hadn't even gone. And now you look at it, 1 decade later, and it's exploded, and the demand for Irish whiskey is crazy. So how'd you get into it, and what's going on over there?
Yeah, I got into it they probably back in like 2013. I was in university. I have a very whiskey related degree of economics, was my undergraduate degree. And I had like life planned out. I was going to go work in the World Bank. I was going to do a PhD in the London School of Economics it's called Money and Banking. It's like how countries create, destroy, and lend each other cash. So like I was like trajectory set, and I took a year out in my final year and went and worked in Canada. And I ended up I knew I just wanted to work in an Irish bar. I was in Vancouver, wanted to work in an Irish bar because I figured I'd get tips. And I spectacularly, I applied to this place. That was kind of the genesis of my whiskey love and journey. I forgot to attach the resume, which was phenomenal. And I got an email back being like, do you want to attach something or no? And then I went in and they had two positions open. They had a whiskey bartender position in a shebeen, it's like 380 bottles, American classic cocktails, and one tap, and it was Guinness. Or you could be a front of house bartender in the main bar. And it's, excuse me, it was very much the bartending I was used to. And they said, what do you want to be? Which would you rather? And they went, you're Irish. We assume you know about whiskey. And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. How hard can it be? And And I said, yeah, I'll be a whiskey bartender, because I figured that again would make more tips. And I had a fantastic guy called Randy take me under his wing. And I did my first shift, and it was terrifying and terrible because I did not know whiskey. And when we had 380 of them on the wall, I did not know American cocktails because they didn't exist in Ireland. So I, at the end of the shift, I was basically ready to pack it up. And he turned around to me, he said, Matt, you like clearly don't know whiskey. He said, but he goes, but you pull a good pint of Guinness and you talk a lot of shit to the customers. If you're willing to learn, I'll teach you. And thankfully it was his guidance that started me off on the path. Spent about a year in Canada, and I came home and I just said, I said screw this. Basically, I was like, what's this economics nonsense? I fell in love. I just thought the idea that, you know, we've been making whiskey the exact same way for millennia, and in the world of nanotechnology and supercomputers, you can't speed it up. Like, I just thought it was the most amazing product in the world. So I went and I swapped and did a business management master's, and was working with a company that rhymes with Bameson. I don't know if but we I was working with them for a while I was in my master's, and then I went off to the US with Tullamore Dew to look after Pennsylvania, and then a bit of Maryland and DC as well. And then I came home once the contract was up, because the contract was tied to my visa. And been working in Bohan Distillery for the last 4 years. So getting it's fun, and it's great, particularly in the distillery, because you know, being able to grow the knowledge of the modern production practices has helped me in understanding how companies put together new releases. And, you know, when I'm writing about them on Potstilled, I'll have a greater understanding of how these things happen, and then try to make it layman's terms for people who don't sit in distilleries all day. And actually, when I was in the States, I remember my boss actually brought me to a bar in Philly where I met Lou for the first time. And Lou and myself both thought it was really clever that my boss brought us there, because we were both Tullamore Dew ambassadors, and he brought us to the bar that was owned by the brother of David Quinn in Middleton. Right. For Pete's sake in Philadelphia. Yeah. So Peter Quinn, and that actually became a really big. He used to be my football bar on Sundays. So we got and Pete thought it was really funny that I would come and try to make his Jameson bar a Tully bar. So yeah, and that was a lot of fun. I'm back here in Ireland. You caught me. I literally just flew in about 3 hours ago from my first whiskey festival since the pandemic began, which in Amsterdam. So I've just been the last 4 days in Amsterdam, and I'm actually in the beginning of a 6-week tour where I'll be doing. Where am I going? In like 2 days, I'm going to Budapest, then back to Amsterdam, then to The Hague, then to Zurich, then to Milan, and then I'll probably sleep on the last weekend then. And but it'll be quite a run. So yeah, it's fun time.
I've been to that Budapest whiskey event. That's a lot of fun, and those crazy Hungarians, they love their whiskey. They're,
absolutely.
They love anything covered in alcohol.
Drinky.
With alcohol. Yeah, they really like their drink. But I mean, there's a number of guys. You probably know Zoltan Very.
I certainly do. Yeah.
Yeah,
everyone in Ireland knows Zoltan.
Yeah. I thought when he told me his name was Zoltan, I thought you're joking, right? That's the machine that turned Tom Hanks into a little kid in Big. Then you go to Budapest and you realize, oh, that's Hungarian for John.
Yeah, that's everybody.
Everyone's named Zoltan. I thought it was like a Twilight Zone episode. I went to a planet where everyone's named Zoltan. But he's been very influential in convincing a lot of folks to use Hungarian oak over there.
I was literally sending him an email earlier because he's putting one of the vintage mash bills from Bohan Distillery in collaboration with Fanon into Hungarian oak. So just earlier on, I was getting his barrels transferred at the moment. So no, he certainly is, yeah. And it's helpful when you can also go by one name.
Yeah.
It's like Madonna or Zendaya these days.
Except in Hungary.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
in Hungary, who's Zoltan? Which Zoltan? There's many.
Everyone turns around. Yeah.
While we're on the subject of Hungarian oak, are those staves behind you?
Yes, they are staves behind me. It was funny pre-pandemic. I was never in situ regularly enough to do any live streams. And then when the pandemic hit, obviously I stopped traveling. So I would be in the air about 2 weeks of every month. So when and it was never regular. It was always like Tuesday to Thursday, and then the following Saturday to Monday, and it was all over. So it was difficult. And then when the pandemic hit, obviously doing lots of live streaming, I was in my whiskey cupboard for a while, but that was a pain in the ass. And then I was over by the window for a while when it was sunny, and then that was kind of difficult. And eventually, I just decided I wanted to do a stave wall. So it's actually two pallets that the yeast came in for the distillery. And then these are two leaky bourbon barrels from Brown Foreman that we shook in the distillery, piled them into my boot or into my trunk, and then I spent about a week building it, because particularly one of the things I didn't think about was that we built the wall like this, but the staves bow out, so the wall is front heavy. So building the feet on it was quite difficult. And then on the back, I've had to attach like bars that I have huge strapping. And I actually have a Tullamore Dew gym bag filled with building sand hung from the top, and it's down the bottom to give it counterlever.
Oh my God.
So you might be crushed at any moment like a mouse trap, huh?
Yeah,
I'm kind of watching for that.
I was gonna say we put a actually have a Tullamore Dew crate and a big plant that usually goes here when you don't see the pre-prep that goes into tidying up this corner, but like we have it in the way that like nobody can touch this wall.
Well, Matt, if you were crushed, I'd hate to see it, but it would
ratings
go viral.
Oh yeah, my God, we'd go viral.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Irish whiskey guy gets crushed by barrel. See it. 3 million views. But now you guys tell us a little more about Bowen, the distillery. What are you guys making? What are you doing?
Well, Bowen Distillery is set up by the Cooney family, and so it is Pat and his 5 kids. And I say kids, they're all in their 30s. They've been working in the drinks industry for the last, I think combined, Pat particularly has been in the drinks industry for like over 40 years. So they've been producing cream liqueurs for 30 years and then have gone into whiskey for the last about 6 years. So there's a brand, The Whistler, which is a source brand. And basically that came about before the distillery was commissioned. And in that we have 6 different, I suppose, distillery distillates that we've sourced at either new make or in various forms of aged. We've our own warehouses and bottling lines down in Tipperary, so for the cream liqueurs. So everything gets stored down there with our fantastic. We got a new warehouse manager and he's shit hot, so that makes me really happy. But so we have about 30 different cask types down there, and the core kind of tenets of that is that it's good quality, consistent, but differentiated. So I never want any of the products we release to taste like anyone else's, if that makes sense, because it's sourced. So we do a lot of work creating very flavorsome. I think also in a lot of cases, good value whiskeys with this. The average bottle sold in Ireland for Irish whiskey, excluding like Jameson, is €90 at the moment, which can be quite price prohibitive for a lot of people who are starting their whiskey journey. So, and then the distillery itself is headed up by Michael Walsh, the head distiller. And he's got a really multinational distilling team with him. And
that, good God, you guys are from all over.
we have a running joke that you have to be at least bilingual to work at the distillery, because by accident we've ended up with a massively multilingual team. So Michael and his one of the distillers, Cullum, are both from the Gaeltacht, so their first language is Irish. So they're great, because particularly when we get asked by our US importer, we got asked once for a video about whiskey that specifically stated had to be in English yet incomprehensible in its Irishness. That they wanted a video that was so authentic that we needed to subtitle it. So we just got the lads out because they've got thick West Kerry accents. And then we've got Marius from Lithuania, so he speaks Russian, Lithuanian, and English. We've got Ludo from France, who is mind-boggling because he speaks Chinese, Russian, French, Spanish, and English.
Slacker.
Yeah, I know, right? And Alex, actually one of our distillers as well. He's from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and he's a good man for speaking a bit of German. Then I'm trying to think. Oh, Rowan Lacey just joined us recently as well. He was formerly a superstar brand ambassador with Irish Distillers, and while he was there, I got his production qualifications, and he's fluent in French. And then I'm learning Russian, so there's 3 of us on site who speak Russian to each other. And then even it kind of spirals. We joke that that's now a job requirement and we always say as well that the distillery dogs are part of the team. So if you go to the Bowen Distillery website and look at the distillery team, the dogs have their own profiles. And I think we put down for Bessie, who's Michael's dog, comes from West Kerry, so she speaks. I think I said canine, and then in Irish I wrote out dog language. And then I think Matt, we gave everyone 2 languages anyway, so it works out. But the distillery commission on single pot still, that's the vision of the distillery, specializing in mixed mash bills. So we've distilled 17 different styles of single pot still at the moment, 17 different mash bill recipes, varying from GI compliance. So in Ireland, we can only use up to 5% other grains, although a submission has been made by the Whiskey Association to bring that up to 30% other grains, because Fionnán O'Connor has done a huge amount in terms of research and found that we all knew the 5% wasn't historically accurate, but he quantified it in like very, very easy to understand and like real examples of here actually it was really a third. That's changing, but the distilleries distilled a huge amount of single pot still distillates using wheat oats and rye, and actually the distillery has the team and the equipment is just set up brilliantly for processing and mixed mash bills, and including oats, which is one of our favorite grains to use. Our brewing, at all. No, and our brewing, the people who put in our brewing system, we asked them about processing oats. I think they said they wouldn't certify anything over 5%. They just said we're not coming back. Like, we're just, when you make cement, you can fix it. And thankfully, Alex Witt from Pennsylvania, when he was doing his master's in brewing distilling, he actually got in contact with Fionnán O'Connor about oats and distillation, and his thesis was in the efficient distillation of oats.
Wow.
So that was incredibly fortunate to have when we started talking about distilling up to 30% oats. And at the moment, I don't think anyone's distilled past 15 before they've created cement. So we were able to do up to 30%, and we didn't even have a reduction in the transfer rates. So it was as if we were making normal single pot still. So, but and then to top that all off, in the first year's production, then we also won the world's best new make at the World Whiskey Awards. So blind taste testing. They went through. We beat tons of Scottish distilleries making famous malts, and I think at the end it came down to ourselves and I think Caledonia Distillery in Western Canada. I think they're one of their. I think actually their Puccin and ourselves were up against each other for world's best new make in the blind tasting. That's hearsay because I obviously wasn't in the tastes room. So when it came down to it, that was what I think was rated the top two. But we were world's best, and we haven't stopped the distillation train of single pot still. And then to confuse the matter even more, our stills are set up with a huge amount of different technology, but including reflux coils, so we can put glycol through coils in the swan neck of the stills.
Oh.
We can change the temperature of our condensing column, and we've got subcoolers so we can flash condense if we need to. And then we also have nano technology in the line arm, so it's copper crystals covered in copper paint, so that if we make really heavy, we can make light, heavy, and core distillate in the stills with one recipe. Now, other big distilleries do something similar, but they do it by cut points. So they'll make larger cuts, and then this will be a light distillate, or a heavy distillate, and then make tighter cuts, and this will be a light distillate. The way Michael does it is he actually turns on all of the condensers, the condensing columns in the the reflux coils in the neck, and he basically freezes the condensers. So he has one spirit run, and he'll literally only take off light distillate for the first middle half of the hearts, and then he'll essentially pause the distillation, transfer that away. So it's only the light esters, the more volatile alcohols. And then what's left after that is literally all the stuff that couldn't get out of the still, all of the heavy alcohols. We'll turn everything off, and then that'll come through in the hearts, and then that'll be sent off for barreling separately. And when you combo them back, if you put a 50-50, you still don't get the regular distillate, which is incredibly cool. So Michael always slags me because I coined the phrase a physical flavor library, because that's what we're trying to build. And actually, the problem is I put it into all of the copy that are on his pages, so it looks like he's saying it's a physical flavor library. So he just has to say it all the time now. It's great. That's how you get new phrases in there. But so single pot still, we do about.
Your line arms, what angle are they?
They're slightly descended. But the idea behind that was the stills are designed because essentially Pat Cooney wanted to make 80s style, like single pot still Dublin distillate. And when the engineers were there, they said basically like, it was kind of one of those things, was like, you really like that, we really like that, but perhaps other people would like lighter spirits. So they created the stills. They're big, fat, squat stills. And this technology was put in, so it's descending to take heavy distillate out, but then the rest of the components are there to create light spirit as well if we need to. So it's actually in all honesty, it's of independent distilleries, it's a bit of a Ferrari in terms of the processing power of both brewing and distillation, which is nice to play with, and it's 24-hour production at the moment. So. Yeah. The guys are churning out single pot still like there's no end.
You're was this the project? What the various mash bills? Was this the process that Fionan was working with you guys on? You guys were working on a project together.
Yes. So Fionan and myself are good friends. And he's a whiskey historian, essentially, for want of, but he's getting a doctorate in whiskey at the moment. But we've always been good friends, and also kind of riff off each other quite well, because he has an encyclopedic memory and is very interested in the history of Irish whiskey. And I am very much interested in modern production practices and the creation of whiskey, or the recreation, but in physical terms. So we've always melded very well together, and he was looking for a distillery to distill these historic mash bills, and we pitched it to the Cooney family. They were up for it, and basically the big thing of that was what happened was he came with a list of mash bills, a list of grains and recipes, which, you know, was kind of terrifying to look at the beginning, because we at that point hadn't actually distilled anything in wheat, oats, or rye, or maybe a small amount, but handfuls. And the project was actually fantastically interesting because as it's a part of a PhD program, and it was also having evaluations from Heriot-Watt University as well in terms of chemical makeup. It's not, and there's sometimes a little bit of confusion. People think that we got all these historic recipes from all these different distilleries and we made it the way they made it, and that's not quite true. What he was trying to show was the flavor contribution that these grains made to the distillate, and why did people do them or use them. So we actually distilled them exactly the same way as each other. Every single variable had to be held constant, so that the only difference is the amount of grain we use in each one, which was actually very interesting, because I learned a lot about distilleries because Michael had to put his thinking cap on, our head distiller, because he had to widen the cuts and bring off the distillate at a lower ABV than normally we would, but only slightly, but in fear of a bad yield. So if we couldn't process the oats efficiently and we screwed up, we wouldn't be able to change our process midway through the campaign. So he had to put in a huge amount of backstops and variables in there as well. But literally everything was the exact same. Fermentation times, temperature stands, transfer rates, the amount of time we spent pouring the yeast into the bub tank. Like it was so scientifically strict, which was made for a really interesting project, because, as Michael said himself, as we went through them, we were systematically distilling 13 kind of mash bills, but 10 kind of core ones. But you learn things as you go along, and we started low oats up to the most oats is what we were most fearful of. So we systematically did it. But you learn things about processing oats, and learn things about rye, and you learn things about wheat. But the problem is you can't change that going into the next distillation or the next brew, because you have to do it held constant for a scientific evaluation. So it was incredibly interesting. And also we got to have Fanon in the distillery every day for 2 months. Also, it was bonkers. Like the Cooney family literally just gave Fanon a distillery, a multi-million euro distillery, and he was in charge. Like it was spectacular. Like
well,
it was
funny. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, we would sit down on Monday morning and the Coonies would look at Fanon and go, "What are we doing? Like, what's the game plan?"
He's a funny guy. I ran into him. I was in Dublin one time, and he was supposed to meet me at a pub, and he was coming from somewhere. He was been doing research, and he had this book where he just had, "Oh, Marty, look what I got here. You want to see this? Look at this. I got these mash bills. It's from 1861. This place blew up. This place over here. This was eaten by a giant banshee, but it was a really great, just this list and just tons of them. He was so excited about it. I just thought it was so funny.
How many variables did you do, or tests did you do? How big was the DOE there?
Rephrase the question.
Sure. How many trials did you do of all these different?
We did Fanon gave us essentially 10 historic mash bills that kind of codified the inclusion of different grains in different amounts and different combinations. We did a number of trial or blind test distillations, or like kind of baseline distillations. So we did a 50-50 malt barley and unmalted barley distillation. We did a 60-40 and a 40-60 just to have as kind of like double blinds and baselines. Yeah. And then it was the 10 mash bills that Fanon gave us. And we did 4 brews. So it was 2 ton louder ton. So 40,000 liters essentially we brewed for each one. But we did everything had to be without enzymes for Fanon's analysis. because of the way it would have been done. But,
Okay.
but that left us with missing data points just from a distillery point of view, because we wanted to know if they're difficult grains to brew with, but we did have modern enzymes. What was that going to do? So we actually split. The first 2 mashes would be done without enzymes, and the second 2 mashes would be done with enzymes, to see what the yields difference were. And in some cases, it was really strange. Like you'd have, sometimes you do things you'd expect, like when you we learned that kind of 40% malt is kind of our limit for once we dip below 40, our yields declined. But if you held around 40, your yields were at exactly what you'd expect them to be if it was, 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever. But then there was other times that the brew or the mash in without enzymes, I think in one case had higher ABV yield than the one with the enzymes. So I don't know what happened there. But it was very interesting, and it was an incredible amount of data that we had to pull and monitor on a kind of a daily basis. And now Fanon he's taken all these distillates and he's basically Fanon's a really amazing person, because he's just a magnet of enthusiastic people. So he actually had he called them he had a sensory analysis tasting as a part of his PhD, and he actually had 2 of them due to difficulties with lockdowns and stuff. But what it was a blind taste test of all of the distillates prepared at 30% and 60%, arranged in certain ways. So some things would have been like least oats to most oats, or and all of these people were master distillers and blenders from pretty much every single distillery in the country. And he took all of that data and brought it to, it was called Codified by Harriet Watt, and they also put all of the distillates through gas and liquid chromatography as well. So he's built he's built an incredible, almost like flavor map
library,
exactly, of contributions of the grains. Because, and in particular, one thing that we kind of, Michael Fanon and myself had a realization as we were doing it, is we were so concentrated on the adjunct grains, the wheat, oats, and rye. So we were like, it's 5% oats, and then we're also going to add 5% rye, and then we're going to add 10% wheat. And we were always thinking about what will they do to the flavor of the mash. But what we were never thinking of was you have to remove something to add those in. And we had an incredible combination of flavors by the reduction of malt, or in some cases increasing the green barley. And that was, I think, even more so a very interesting thing for us, because like oats, like Lou, I'm going to pick on you because you just turned your microphone on. If I said I said oats in distillation, what are kind of flavor points that you'd think of off the top of your head?
Well, I don't. I think more of feel, I guess.
Yeah. Well.
It's weird. I sometimes get like a mixture of creamy and sharp.
Yeah.
From oats.
So that's what we thought when we went in as well. That's exactly what the oats would do. We've always been told oats will make a creamy mouthfeel. And this, that, and it was funny because we were sitting there and no one's drank whiskey with oats in it for decades. And a few people have brewed them recently, and they have got that creamy mouthfeel and whatnot. But we processed our oats to essentially not make cement. We had to break the beta glucan bonds that were in there. And our oats, not our oats, Boan Distillery's oats, taste of raspberry sorbet, lemon sherbet. Like they are sweet and delicious and tantalizing. Like there's no dryness, there's none of that creaminess, there's no porridge, there's no cement. Like it's hilarious as well, because in whiskey world, the European flavor palettes and the American flavor palettes are quite different in what they like in terms of when we're doing production of whiskeys. There's obviously a slightly sweeter profile in the US, and then there's a slightly drier profile in Europe. And we're tasting this, and I was like, if we made a whiskey especially for the US, it'd just be all fucking oats. Like it's just, and that was one of the things I said. Like it is a flavor bomb of deliciousness. Like it's heavenly, it's fantastic. And if you read some of Fanon's tasting notes on which are also I'll send them to you at some point, but he did tasting notes for these himself, and it is possibly the most entertaining tasting notes I've read in my life. Like one of them, he said it was plum chicken at an outdoor Irish wedding, I think was one of his favorites.
Specifically outdoor.
Yeah.
Because there was grassiness in the background.
Grassiness, right? Yeah.
And there was a bit of a bridal gown.
A sequin note.
Cake.
So obviously, you had to keep the yeast constant. How did you guys go about selecting? Is that just your house strain?
Yeah, it's our house strain. In having lived in the US and being able to experience some of the US distilling scene and following people like yourselves, and yeast is of much more consideration in the US than in Ireland at the moment. A few people do few things with it, but it's generally there's kind of two main yeasts that are used. There's MX yeast, which is by the Kerry group, and then we use a slightly different yeast. I actually don't know who makes it, but we also used to have a craft brewery on site, and the brewers would always just call it turbo yeast. It's got a job to do. It's got to convert some sugars. So yeah, the experimentation is there in some companies, but as kind of an industry, it's yet to be a highlight of differentiation in terms. What we're looking for at the moment is good conversion, and that's what it does. So the yeast, I can say, Liz, that wasn't even a topic in what we did.
Well, you had a few other things to consider, right?
Yeah.
And now, Matt, did you, out of all the variations, did you find one that you go, why did they make it like this? Because I would just think back in those days, not everybody was making whiskey for taste. They're sometimes making whiskey for effect.
Yeah.
So did you find some that you go, ooh, yeah, this was definitely them just throwing everything into the pot because it was what was available?
Well, what I'll say is, like, Fanon's PhD is literally, it's the topic of whiskey, but it's actually agroeconomics. So his PhD is saying, why in the world are these grains in whiskey at various points? Because they come cyclically. There wasn't quite there definitely wasn't one we didn't like, but we were really annoyed because there was only one whiskey recipe in there that was GI compliant, so it had only 5% other grains, and everything else was a shooting parlor of everything else. And we're all really annoyed because the one that was 5% other grains was one of the best, and we were really picked and that is honestly such a delicious, and it's just coincidental that it's GI compliant today, but it is absolutely stunning whiskey or whiskey spirit, and we found grains that we liked working with, and we found grains that have an effect that we liked, but maybe we won't use them in the same quantities. The house mash bill right now came from that exploration, and it's 40% malt and 55% green barley and 3.75% oats and 1.25% rye. And that we thought the 1.25% rye it's 125 kilo bag. I'm pretty sure that's why it's just an odd number.
Mm-hmm.
It makes such a difference to the spirit, because we have the distillate at 5% oats with no rye, and then we were like, we loved what the rye was doing at higher quantities, so we're like, it's got to be in the mash bill. But it maybe at the time it was a bit of rye in the mash bill, because we can say rye is in the mash bill. But no, it cuts it incredibly. Like the rye in Irish whiskey, or the rye in our distillery, has a kind of like a pastrami, smoked cured meats, olive bread, like a phenom. I have to defer to Fanon on this one. He talks about Olive Garden,
The restaurant.
Sorry,
The restaurant.
yeah, he says that that the effect of rye in his head is just a visit to Olive Garden. No, I've never been, but his thing was like it's bready and it's like herbal breads and olive oil,
right.
And as much of them as you want, they will bring
Yeah,
more.
that's right. Loads of bread.
So it is a very interesting introduction, and then the wheat adds an incredibly dry and buttery and pastry element, which is interesting because we would be very familiar with American wheat whiskies. And then Fanon actually got some guidance from a master distiller in the US of one of the very large distilleries, because Fanon just has contacts like that for some reason. And they said, they were like, well, in your case, you're drinking what the bottles we had to try to get an idea were all column distilled rye, or column distilled wheat. And he was saying, when we pot distill wheat in our distillery, it tastes exactly the way you're describing it. So it was nice to see that we weren't just way off making some strange wheat contributions. And then the oats are raspberry sorbet, man. Like it is fantastic, tantalizing. Like it just adds a phenomenal sweetness, even in small quantities, which is just absolutely stunning and stellar. So it's a lot of fun. And we also have, got a great relationship with Fanon now as well. So we pitch him ideas, and some of them he loves, and we pitched him an idea the other day, and he fucking hated it. So we are in a very privileged opportunity. We haven't done it yet, but we're able to pick. We have the potential to access some sherry casks that were laid down at the beginning of General Franco's takeover of Spain.
Good God.
So we were like, well, what would have been? I was just saying, like, that's when they were laid down. It was just like his first year coming to power. So I was trying to think, was there a mash bill in that the kind of whatever the 40s era in Ireland that would go into it, because we kind of wanted to do like something that of the era when this sherry cask was put into a Solaris system. We put it in, and I was like, and then we'll probably have some stupid fun with something Franco-esque in the branding in 10 years time. And he sent me back like a one-word text, and I pitched him the whole thing, and he sent me back a one-word text. He said, I can see it now, no chill filtration, no added colorings, and no civil liberties. So and to make it Spanish, each N had the like Nunos over it. So it was funny. So anyway, I turned around to the guys and I was like, I don't think Fanon likes this idea. I don't know, maybe we should choose a different direction. Yeah.
Seriously, dude, why don't you just make a Hitler whiskey?
Yeah. Like in our heads, it was fun, and we were gonna like poke fun at it, and it was gonna be a clever idea. And then like Fanon came back, and we were like, yeah, actually, that's probably a really bad idea. But it was only the tag on at the very end. I was like, oh, it was the year that Franco came to power, and he was just like, why was that relevant? So yeah,
it is kind of. I mean, he's all the way down in Spain. It's not like
Yeah, it was the sherry cask. That's what I was just trying to.
Right.
So, but yeah, so it's fun, and we get to hear Fanon's crazy ideas too. So, we like those, and every December as well in the distillery, kind of last 2 months in November and into December, we stop general production and we go into experimentation only.
Wow.
So that's when we made all of the vintage mash bills that we did with Fanon. Was our first year of experimentation. So the December is always set for mad shit. So we have a competition internally to see who can come up with the mad shit. And I think the only thing we set on at the moment is we're missing like 2 data points from Fanon's thing that we just need to increase a little bit more rye in a distillate, just to like literally we have like a whole flavor matrix and there's just like 2 dots missing. And then after that, we don't know what we're making. So we're trying to figure that out. But it's nice. And particularly it's nice to talk to US consumers about it as well, because mash bills aren't a thing that get talked about in Ireland and Scotland too much. So it's a fun one.
Hey, Matt, let's move over to Potstilledcom, because you've been doing this for how many years now?
Oh, like 8 or so, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's been that long?
Wow.
Yeah, I set it up, I think, in 2013. And I remember my then girlfriend at the time, she was kind of bugging me. She was like, why don't you set one up? It'll look good, if you want to get, because I wanted to be in the whiskey industry. And she was like, yeah, if you write about it. I went to an interview, actually, and this girl had a food blog that had 10,000 followers. And the job that we're going for had nothing to do with food. But they were like, that's amazing. You're obviously, well-versed in marketing. You'll get this job. So the girlfriend at the time, she was like, set up a blog about whiskey. And I remember distinctly, I was like, who the fuck would read a blog about whiskey? But the thing is, I remember saying that, being like, I don't understand why people would read about whiskey. A little, if I could fast forward 8 years. And funnily enough, Potstilled was a holding name for myself. I didn't know what to call it, and I was like, Potstilled, it's pot distilled spirit. I just pushed the 2 words together, and I was like, I'll come up with something better in a month's time or something. Right. And I wrote like 2 or 3 articles, and then I think I got invited to my first like press launch. And someone came over and they were like, hey, you're Potstilled. And I was like, oh, well, it's fucking stuck now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was.
But now you're reporting on the industry.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you read your stuff, you'll be reporting on what another distillery is doing or what's going on in the industry. But now does finding out info from those distilleries, since you work for a distillery? I mean, usually within the drink industry, there's not, people can be pretty friendly and forthcoming, but sometimes maybe not, especially in Little Ireland, where it's now getting revving up and competition.
That's a good point. It's funny because years ago I made a very, very conscious and delineated decision to separate, Potstilled Matt and Matt Healy, who works for whatever company. So I have a rule internally that I will never speak about whom I am employed by. Because if I say something nice, it's biased, and if I say something shit, I'll get fired. But people kind of understand that as well. But quite honestly, it's not really ever been an issue. I've had some of the bigger distilleries have a really big issue with it, and I've had years of different battles, and and like weird things, like there's a different whiskey personality in Ireland who's called Potstill Will, and someone took issue once with something I wrote, and it wasn't anything, like I was just like, oh, and this is a thing that they did. That was it. There was no slander or anything, and they called him up thinking it was me and threatened to break his kneecaps over it. And he was like, and he thought it was hilarious because it obviously wasn't. It had nothing to do with him. So, but like I've had people tell me that I cannot and I am not allowed to be both in the industry and speak on the industry, which I'm still here, funnily enough. But my platform is designed to lift, to promote the entire category, and particularly those who don't have marketing budgets. So I've never had an issue. I've never had someone say no. usually people call me and they will tell me at the beginning of the call who they're speaking to. So they're like, right, I'm talking to Potstilledcom Matt. I'm like, okay. And in
You should have had just
It's
yeah,
like you have
yeah,
two different personalities.
yeah,
I'm now
yeah.
speaking to Potstill Matt.
Yes, but like literally, people say that they'll call me and they're like, I need to speak to Potstill for a minute. I'm like, okay, we're good, let's do it. And there's also
Oh, that was for the benefit of the recorder.
yeah. But it's another one as well. Irish Malts is an Irish whiskey website that's kind of exploded and taken off, and they've a subscription service called 3 Drams, and I do the hosting of the live streams once a month. But for a while, John, the owner, we were working together on 3 Drams, or I was just brought in to do the hosting, so it's not my business, but we sell to him as well. And for a while, he was my customer. So we would have a phone call and he would hang up when he was done talking about Bohan business. And then he'd call me back to talk about 3 Drams, but like not like 10 minutes apart. Like he would just end the call and recall again. And he's like, wow. So Matt, what's going on? So like,
I wasn't just talking to you. That was someone else.
That was someone else. We're doing different things. But people, I think people see that like I'm not out here, saying everyone's shit, and I'm trying to point out how fucking great everyone is.
You're not the whiskey sponge.
No. I do love reading the whiskey sponge. But I also, as a part of my job, I know the technical file like inside and backwards. So I actually get a lot of distilleries calling me. Instead of reading the file, they'll call me and it's really funny because it was a distillery that's being built that isn't commissioned yet or anything, but they needed to know something about the technical file. So they rang somebody else. So I don't know them, but they rang somebody else and they went, you need to ring this Potstilledcom Matt guy. So then they rang me and they were like, Matt, I hear you're the man to talk to about the technical file. And I was like, I mean, it's a freely publicly available document. It's long. I understand it's long and it's written kind of like legal jargon, but anyone can read it. But yeah, I get yeah, they should, or they can call me, but that's fine because I'll answer.
You're like a lawyer in a way. You're a whiskey lawyer, an Irish whiskey lawyer. So you're deciphering.
Yes. Well, that's a lot of what that's actually probably more true as to why people call me. Mm-hmm. They're like, does it say this explicitly? And I'm like, well, it doesn't say that explicitly, but it does say this, like which fortunately or unfortunately means this, if that makes sense, And for a while, like the way the file was worded, you couldn't make Irish whiskey in one pot. If you used one pot 3 times, that wouldn't have been classified as Irish whiskey. This is me speaking as my opinion at this point. I got legal advice. Someone volunteered legal advice in like 2014 in one of my first articles. And they said, by the way, Matt, you made some implicit statements. They said, if you put the word apparently before what you're about to say, it's much harder to sue you. Okay. So I say apparently a lot. So apparently no, but the document was written in a way that they kind of wrote it and they said they included in it a brief guide on how you make whiskey. So it was like, step 1, you've grain. Step 2, you mill the grain on site is how it's worded. Oh. And then, but the thing is, when they wrote it like that, they said, oh, you distill it in a pot and then you move it to a second pot and distill it there. And you may move it to a third pot if you so choose. But the problem was that, or what I would perceive as the problem in that was that wasn't particularly intended to be a part of the legal definition. That was just like a top note guide on just, if you stumbled on this file, this is what we're doing and this is how you do it. But then it was put in a document that was then made law. So it said you had to mill on site, no distillery. So there's a tiny distillery in kind of the north of Ireland called Cologne, who's incredibly popular. But they took up something like 1/12 of their floor space because they had to put in a mill that was never part of the business plan. Because they were like, we're not going to be able to mill efficiently. We'll buy pre-milled grains that are efficiently milled and we'll use them. But thankfully that's now been changed, and as has the pots. So you can make Irish whiskey in one pot now. But it was just kind of this like accidental wording, because it was just how it was done. If that made sense.
Yeah, I reached out to you recently because, and Lou and Liz, I don't know if you've heard of O'Shaughnessy's distillery that's being built in Minnesota.
Yep.
And they brought over Brian Nation from Ireland to be their distiller.
I'll just be honest.
It's relatively new. In fact, I'm not sure if it's completed.
I don't think so.
They have Brian Nation and Dave Perkins together. In fact, they have another dream team. They have a sales, former DIAGEO sales exec that I used to work with back in the day, and he's heading up, I think, their marketing. But anyways, they're calling it an Irish American whiskey, and I thought, can you do that? I mean, I would think, but you said that they can. Yes, Matt?
Yeah, I get this question a lot.
Apparently they can.
And Fanon, yes, apparently. Fanon also just sent me something similar the other day. And it's because they're not in the same line in terms of Irish whiskey marketing and product guidelines. The phrase, the protected international phrase, is Irish whiskey together and on one line. So what O'Shaughnessy's or O'Shaughnessy's have is Irish plus American, next line whiskey. So what they're actually delineating it as, they're demarcating it as a whiskey, that you just, and this is just what would be called a fanciful name, is just Irish plus American. It's not a category. Their category is not nationless, but like in terms of like a TTB declaration on the label, what they're saying is this is whiskey. And Irish plus American is just it's just type, if that makes sense. It's depressing how much of my job is spent working with TTB and labels, and I know the processes of that an incredible amount. I really enjoy it. It just makes me sound like a really sad person that I know. But yeah, Fanon sent me something the other day actually, and it said premium. I think it said premium Irish whiskey. And you can't, they don't, on the labeling guidelines, that you can't have an adjective attached to the category, the protected titles. So you can't say premium Irish whiskey, but they had premium Irish, and the next line was whiskey, or it was like premium Irish whiskey, and that was the kind of idea. Much in the same way that peated single malt doesn't exist in Irish whiskey law. You can have peated single malt Irish whiskey, and that's basically how that was in the revision of the technical file. That became a big point that they're trying to clarify and get right and whatnot. But I think it's remained that the recognized protected category is single malt Irish whiskey, and whether that's peated or not. Because if you made it peated single malt Irish whiskey, I think the argument was that you would then have to have a definition of peated single malt Irish whiskey. And then, like before, you'd likely write in a definition that excludes other things. Like, is your whiskey peated after 2% peat included? Or does it have to be 100%? Can the barrel be peated? There's a... So the in terms of labeling, it's peated one line, single malt is one phrase, Irish whiskey is another phrase. They can be together or they can be on top of each other, but they can't be interrupted.
Which actually works for marketing. If you have a label, you put peated right above it. It kind of stands out. I was seeing some of that last night at this spirit event I was at, and you'd see peated right up on top. I don't think here in the States, I don't think, Lou, Liz, I don't know if you know about that, but then underneath, you put whatever it is, bourbon or it's a American single malt, and the peated jumps out a little more, and those who are peat heads just go all over it.
Love it.
Hey, Matt, now you were just was that an honorable mention at the World Whiskey Awards?
Oh, I was communicator of the year, highly commended. So second to top, I think is a good way to put it. But
Who was number one?
Barry Chandler, a very charismatic whiskey commentator in the US, who is from Ireland, and he is driving the love of Irish whiskey in the US. He's a very, very large following of very, very enthusiastic and very dedicated American whiskey fans who love Irish whiskey.
Well, he's Matt Healy. That's all I have to say.
Well, I tell you, he's doing Trojan work, and it's nice as well. It's funny in that group that he has, because it's, I think, 10,000 members now from all over the US who are just together loving Irish whiskey. But I mean, one thing we know in Ireland is the sheer enthusiasm Americans have for whatever they want to have it for. So the people in that group, my God, they will live, breathe, die, bleed Irish whiskey. It's a very enthusiastic group. It's nice to see. Like there was a post yesterday about a guy went to a concert, and it was like, a famous music venue of like 20,000 people, and he was like, it was disgraceful. I told the manager that you should have more Irish whiskey than just Jameson. And I was like, I'm sure while he had 20,000 people in his venue, he was very concerned about his Jameson selection. But that's great. I mean, it's fantastic to see, and it brings in a lot of new people and that as well. But hopefully the World Whiskey Awards nominations for Ireland for Icons of Whiskey are being announced, or like the awards being given out at the end of November. So if I was nominated this year, I hope to have my fingers crossed.
Oh, ain't that nice? Well, I've never been nominated. Lou?
Nope.
Liz?
Nope.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
So real good, Matt.
Yeah, I got sent an A3 like framed certificate of it, like of the award. And I asked in work, I was like, "Can I hang this on my desk?" And they were like, "Yeah, of course you can." But so they said it's a huge window into our office you have to walk by on the distillery floor, and I was like, when we have like really tough business meetings, I wanted people to walk by my desk and see an Icon of Whiskey award. I was like, so I was delighted. It wasn't a work award, but I was let hanging at the desk anyway. It's my little ace in the hole there. So,
and now I think you have also joined the ranks of both Liz and Lou, in that you are now writing a monthly piece for the Whiskey Wash.
Pending, yes.
It's still pending.
So it's I have agreed to join the ranks, and I think it's just trying to figure out logistics. So it hasn't begun yet, but hopefully, that's the plan. Because actually, that was one of the first whiskey websites I read. When I proclaimed who the fuck wants to read about whiskey, I was like, these guys have been doing it right. Yeah.
You know that Lou's been writing about whiskey for 25 years.
I still ask the same question.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's amazing.
When you were talking about the people in the Irish whiskey group, I'm like, this shit scares me sometimes, because I mean, like you, I do this for a living and I don't think about it that much.
Yeah.
Or you get, or some folks get their undies in such knots sometimes because they, what was that? Somebody had asked me, I think it was some local fella, or maybe it was a brand, was asking me for Irish whiskey cocktail ideas. And I have a whole list, but I thought, there must be something newer out there. I had a list from like 10 years ago that I compiled. So I went on one of the sites and I posted it. I think it was on the Potstilledcom group, and they, oh my God, you would have thought I had just insulted their mother or something. I was getting nothing.
Oh, the
but
idea of
taste.
an Irish whiskey cocktail at all?
Oh,
Is
well, they didn't want to give. They were just cussing me out for making a cocktail with Irish whiskey. Jim Clark had come in and save me. He said, guys, the man's just asking for a cocktail. What are you doing? They're calling me, what are you, a big pansy? What are you stinking, you call me names? I go, what the fuck?
It's funny because Fanon and myself wrote a kind of a college course for the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy on Irish whiskey. So you can go off and get a certificate in Irish whiskey underwritten by the Scottish University, I think, Qualifications Board. And we got and then funnily enough, people got kind of we launched it. It's a thing to spread around the world. You go and it's really in depth. Fanon wrote, I think, 25,000 words, and I wrote like 40,000 words. Like we spent about a year putting this together. And the funny thing was that Fanon and myself obviously both are kind of orators and love the subject, but I don't think they knew in the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy how much we were going to give them. So like I printed and bound them because they're like theses. And Fanon's one is enormous and mine's even bigger. And I was like, I said in the email that as I like delivered it, I was like, this is factual. You might want to make it interesting. Because like it was an A to Z of how Irish whiskey is made, like and their whole thing was they were like, we want a course on Irish whiskey, but you don't have to have a science degree to understand it. And I was like, cool, we can do that.
Yeah.
Like, but like in my part, like I needed to get like kind of like trying not to write things into law. I'm doing this and that, and I was like, this is not. I didn't write this as a blog post. This is how you make whiskey. I don't know how you're going to make this interesting, but here's 40,000 words. And they've made it really interesting and engaging. And there's, they've different like quizzes in it and stuff. And it's just fantastically done. But the funny thing was that people, when Fanon and myself were announced that the course launched, the amount of people that kind of like came at us, they were like, why the fuck are you writing about Irish whiskey in a Scottish institution?
Oh,
I was like, because no one fucking asked me in Ireland. Like,
and Matt, so I think that you can find that course through your website, right?
Yes, yeah, Potstilledcom, or you can go straight to the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy. I have a link directly on my banner of the webpage or the menu section.
There's actually linked to Potstilledcom, that green rectangle that you see. You can access it there, so check it out. Matt, it's been a super great, albeit it started a little late, but that's on us, I think. Thanks for joining us. It's been a great conversation.
I'm delighted to have been here, guys, and again, apologies about the time differences.
Goddamn Greenwich Mean Time.
Before we go, teeing up next week, a very special guest, Charlie Smith, Master Distiller Emeritus, joining us next week. So please come back and join us. We'll sort out the time zone for next week.
We'll be on the same page this time. We'll have changed our time too.
Yeah.
Okay. See, very good. Anyway, I know we had tons of people. Speaking of time zones, tons of folks signing in from different time zones. So thank you all for joining us. Matt, again, it's been a pleasure. So
great to see you.
Matt, hopefully we'll see you in the new year over in Dublin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone who's gone to Whiskey Live Dublin, I think every Irish distillery is going to pull out all the stops. So
when is that? Do they have a date?
12th and 13th of March.
Oh, I might make.
Wow.
Nothing.
All right,
everyone. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Launch it.
Bye, guys.